Loran Hall était un orateur régulier de la John Birch Society en 1962 à 1963. Voici la deuxième partie d'un de ses discours. Ce discours est intitulé « Cuba Betrayed ». Loran Hall était membre de l'équipe paramilitaire Interpen de Gerry Patrick Hemming, qui effectuait des raids sur le Cuba de Castro. Comme Gerry Hemming, Lee Oswald, Frank Sturgis et Harry Dean, Loran Hall était un partisan de Castro avant de devenir un ennemi de Castro. Tout au long de 1963, Gerry Patrick Hemming et Loran Hall ont rendu visite à l'ex-général Edwin Walker à Dallas à plusieurs reprises. Silvia Odio affirme avoir vu Lee Harvey Oswald en compagnie de 2 Cubains, le 25 septembre 1963. Le FBI a interrogé Loran Hall à propos de cette observation et, dans un premier temps, Loran a admis avoir rendu visite à Silvia Odio, avec Lee Oswald et un Angelo, mais pas Lee Oswald. Lorsque Odio a refusé de changer son histoire, Loran Hall a alors affirmé que ce n'était pas Silvia Odio qu'il avait visité ce jour-là. En septembre 1968, Loran Hall a admis au National Enquirer qu'on lui avait offert $50 000 à Dallas fin octobre 1963 pour assassiner Kennedy. Une offre qu'il aurait refusée.
We needed equipment for our next raid. We sold everything we had. We sold our watches, we sold our pistols, we sold a 56 Chevrolet, we sold our clothes, I sold my wedding band, shoes, everything. On our next raid, we were based outside of, it's impossible to use this base now, so I can tell you that we were near Cape Marie. We were leaving Haiti one night for a raid into Cuba. When we were about 3 or 4 miles off the coastline of Haiti, we noticed 3 boats coming. We figured that these were fishing boats and that we could get some food. We found out that the lead boat was a Kronstadt. Now a Kronstadt is a Russian PT boat, the same PT boats that patrol Cuba. Well, at this time, we had a 57 ARs, 2 30 caliber machine guns, and some hand grenades. As we came along broadside of the Kronstadt, we opened up with everything. The boat sank. The other 2 boats surrendered without firing a shot. Found out Algerians on board. The same as the Haitian people speak. The boats further, we found out that there was arms and explosives on board, plus stacks and propaganda. That the communist propaganda had 2 pictures on it. A picture of Fidel Castro and a picture of propaganda stated, Haitians rise and revolt. Van Bella and Fidel Castro are your brothers. Rise and revolt and from the capitalists. Put the boys in the water and sank the boats and left. A Vossler crossed our waterway for miles, and as it was closing in, we were getting close, so we headed right straight in for the shallow parts of the water. Our boat drug 2.5 foot of water, only 7. As we came in near the shoals, we looked behind and we seen the Vossler plateau. We went ahead and went on into Cuba, and we crossed overland. When we got to where we had intended to go, we made a radio communication center and a fuel dump. We found out that Fidel Castro was on television for 4.5 hours, stating that there had been 2 Russians killed, 4 militiamen killed, and been wounded. He called us traitors to the revolutionists and terrorists. Let's feel good because we knew that on our way out we were contacted for Olman or all the right to the in order to have food for their families and their friends and in their small bit of sabotaging in Cuba. Occasions in Oriente province of milk that was part of the ransom supplies paid for the Bay of Pigs prisoners. Only 10% of the ransom supplies are remaining in Cuba. That the rest of them cannot, they're either being shipped out of the country or stored. They gave me this can of milk and I read it. On this label is a picture of 2 flags, an American flag and a communist Cuban flag. And in between this, written in Spanish, is this: paid for by the government of the United States for the damage to the Bay of Pigs area, those heroes who died in an effort to keep their fatherland free from the capitalist nation 90 miles from our sacred shores. We left the patrol and started towards our boat. We were ambushed. We lost 5 men. We got to the boat and took off. We waited 2 days and went back into Cuba, into Oregon. When we came into the area that the caves were at, we couldn't get within 20 miles of the openings of the caves. We know that there were Russians, civilians, and Russians who were wearing the militia uniform that were patrolling the area. We tried for 2 days to penetrate. We couldn't. We seen earth movers, we seen road graders, we seen all types. So went ahead and left the area and went near Baracoa. When we got near Baracoa, we found out that this was the area that's got the largest assassination sabotage in communist Cuba. We also found out that this is the headquarters for the International Brigade. That in the International Brigade, they have Spanish, Congolese, Algerians, Ghanaians, Russians, Mongolians, Chinese, Czechs, Cubans, and Latins from every Latin American country. That some of these Latins will be sent back to their prospective countries for the purpose of infiltrating and overthrowing the government that now exists there. But that the rest will either remain at the school as cadremen or will become members of the International Brigade. Explain some of the things that we saw in Cuba. House committees. On every corner of every block, in every village, city, and town, you have your house committeemen. Their job is that anybody that enters that block is reported to the militiaman immediately if he does not live in that block. If this man does not, or woman does not have permission by pass to be in the area, he's usually never seen or heard of again. Food. It's true that there is some foods in Cuba. Havana, for instance, has some foods of all varieties, but it's not plentiful and it's all rationed. The reason they have these foods in Havana is that Havana is the showplace of communism. But take Havana. This is where the people are at. This is where the people are starving to death. As an example, the daily diet for a Cuban is a handful of rice, a few beans, and fish. Bread. 1 loaf of bread per family per month is what's rationed. Beef. You don't get beef in outside areas. You do not see 1 dog or 1 cat in any of the southern provinces in Cuba. I know a man who paid $30 for a turkey. Chickens are running $25 on the black market. Eggs, $1 a piece on the black market, if you can get them. Sabotage. The civilian populace is doing anything and everything to sabotage the communists in Cuba. They're cutting their legs and their feet and their hands so that they don't have to go to work. They're staying home from work and calling in and telling them that they're sick. They're tying rags to rats' tails and setting them on fire and sending them through the sugarcane fields. They're putting nuts and bolts in the equipment and machinery in order to slow down and stop the production because the machinery can't be replaced. They're putting sugar in gas tanks of vehicles and machinery in order to ruin them. They put tacks, nails, and broken glass in the streets because the tires can't be replaced. They're cutting the leather belts that drives the machinery. They're setting booby traps of all kinds. If these people had the equipment that our government should have given them in 1959, 1960, 1961, and 1962, they would have blowed the communist rats right out of Cuba. Cuba today could be free. Cuba today could be living under a constitution. But under the Kennedy administration and the Eisenhower administration, they do not see this. They do not want the Cuban people free, for they themselves are one-world thinkers. They themselves are pro-socialist and pro-communist. In Cuba, they formed a new group. The Cuban people call them the Death on Wheels Boys. What this is a group of hardcore communists, murdering, barbaric, most of them are degenerates, most of them use marijuana or These people will go into a small village, town, or a city and contact the defense groups for the defense of the revolution. Now, the defense group's only job is to take down the names of those people who do not work steadily or regularly as they should, or who talks against Fidel or socialism or communism. The defense groups gets these names and cold-bloodedly murders these people. I've seen this on 3 occasions. It is running ravage completely throughout Cuba. Terror into the Cuban people that is second to none. I have two fellows in my group who were members of the 25 Bay of Pigs. That when they were first being trained, they were being trained as special forces groups. This is 10 to 15 men to a team, that they will be dropped into Cuba either by land, sea, or air, and there they will make contact with the underground and the guerrillas for the purposes of training them and they themselves helping in sabotaging. Well, in February of 1961, just 2 months after our great white father in Washington took office, he changed all this. He changed it to an invading force. Now, this great hero of the Pacific War sent less than 1,500 men into Cuba, and in Cuba, the militiaman has 150,000 men and women under arms. Well-equipped, well-trained people, 150,000 of them. Cuba has got a Navy, an Air Force, an artillery division, a tank division. They've also got missiles. In Okinawa, during World War II, the United States sent in support and in actual invasion, over 250,000 people. They had aircraft carriers, battle wagons, cruisers, destroyers, bombers of all kinds. But yet, our same government sent 1,500 in to Cuba. I know some of the Cuban and American pilots, civilians, that were to have taken part in the Bay of Pigs invasion. They were issued P-51s, B-26s, C-54s, and C-46s. That on the morning of the invasion, when they went out to their planes to take off, the CIA had to forcibly, by arms, restrain them from taking off. And then the CIA let 2 unarmed cargo planes take off and fly over Cuba. One of them was a C-54 with 4 Americans on board, and the other one was a C-46 with 3 Americans on board. These 2 planes with 7 Americans were lost over Cuba and shot down by artillery and aircraft. If they had have had the air support that was promised by the Kennedy and Eisenhower administration alike, they would be alive today. So I thereby hold Kennedy responsible for the deaths of those 7 Americans that were murdered by reason of not having air support that the Kennedy and Eisenhower administration had promised the Bay of Pigs boys. I also know a Cuban, who is now a civilian, that was in the United States Navy and a member of the UDT team number 21. He stated that he was on board the USS Boxer on the day before and the day of the invasion. He stated that on the day before the invasion, that the USS Boxer, the USS Randolph, along with 7 escort vessels, all painted off their numbers and their names. That all the aircraft on board the 2 aircraft carriers had their numerals, names, and insignias painted off with gray paint. State that on the day of the invasion, they were sitting close enough to the Bay of Pigs area to see the Cubans landing at the Bay of Pigs. They could see the artillery, they could see the blasts that were coming out into the ocean. I also know that there were 4 F-4U fighter planes that was flying over the Bay of Pigs area on the morning of the Bay of Pigs invasion. That when the ground crews that was in the Bay of Pigs ordered for a strafing mission, they gave the coordinates, received orders from their mothership, do not engage the enemy. I repeat, do not attack. Return to your mothership for cap cover immediately. Where that was on the radio, then stated this, and I quote, "Well, the least you bastards can do is come down and see how real men die." And then the 4 planes flew off. I'll now tell you about some of the phony airdrops that was dropped by the CIA. I know a man by the name of Padron who had over 400 men. He was ordered by the CIA to go into the San Cristal Mountains. Before midnight or 5 minutes after midnight, he would receive his airdrop. Well, the airdrops didn't come. After midnight, the militia attacked. He got out with 11 men. Right leg. I know ya. who was to have received a shipment of arms. Instead, he received 5,000 plastic underarm holsters. A man by the name of Balbuena, but didn't have firing pins. I know another man by the name of Herrera. He received M1 Garands and 30 caliber machine guns, but they received the wrong ammunition. I know another man by the name of Hernandez that received grenades. Their grenades had instant detonators. He lost 3 of his men. When you pull a pin and throw them, they explode immediately. I know another man by the name of Cantillo that ordered air tanks and explosives. He got them. The air tanks were contaminated and the explosives was black powder. We are now defending the butchers in Cuba. The pattern to me is real, plain, and clear. Eisenhower knew as early as 1957 that Fidel Castro and the revolution was communist, but yet he did not say one word about this to the American people. Quite to the contrary. He knew in 1957 that Fidel was a communist because Ambassador Smith, who at that time was the ambassador to Cuba, sent a complete dossier concerning the communist background of the revolution and Fidel. We didn't intervene in 1959 when all the American properties were being confiscated and stolen by the communists. We didn't intervene in 1959 when all the Cuban civilians were being murdered. Then came the Bay of Pigs, which, as I stated before, was a murder plot to gain the election for the liberal-minded, fuzzy-headed people that are throwing our country down a one-world socialist path. We are now coexisting with Cuba. We'll be giving the communists in Cuba Guantanamo Bay within a year. The United States government is now supporting 3 known socialists and communists for the purpose of reinvading Cuba. These 3 people is Manuel Artime of the MRR, Manolo Rai, and Guiter Menoyo in Puerto Rico, Guatemala, and Nicaragua under the sponsorship of the CIA. The 3K brothers will stoop to absolutely no known depth to gain the re-election. We've lost 24 countries in the last 18 years to communists, and Latin America is next. Juan Bosch of Santo Domingo is a communist. Betancourt of Venezuela is a communist. Chadi Jagan of Ghana is a communist. Goulart of Brazil is a communist. Colombia is communist. Peru and Chile will be voting in communist through free elections this year. Honduras is next. We, the American people, have got to free one captive nation to show the rest of the world that we, the American people, do not tolerate or assist or condone the communists. If we set one example, these other people will then resist communism. But now all they can see is that the American government is helping to advance the communists. Our free enterprise system must stand and take a stand so that we can show the rest of the world that we are freedom-loving people so that they will then resist communism. There is fighting going on in Cuba right now, and you have a fight on your hands too. Your battleground is not in the mountains. Your battleground is here, and the time to fight is now. Our enemies are the same people. The only difference is that we are fighting with guns, and your fight is with knowledge and words of truth. Not quarter truths, not half truths, but the whole truth and the Word of God. In closing, I would like to read a letter from Enrique Layaca, a Cuban survivor of the abortive 1961 Bay of Pigs invasion. We landed at the Bay of Pigs at the crucial hour. The air cover we was promised was withdrawn and we were betrayed, and you know by whom. Many of my comrades in arms died and the rest were thrown into communist prisons. I was released because of ransom paid to a butcher by the government who betrayed us. But mark this well, there will be no one left to pay your ransom, no one left to come to your rescue. There will be no second chance for Americans, and I thank you.